It's your girl, Amanda Jane, honestly speaking today with the grandson of Nelson Mandela, Ndaba Mandela. Mr. Ndaba, did I pronounce that right?
Yes.
Mandela, it's a
Yes.
pleasure to have you in our innovation lab.
Thank you.
You know, family, it's been a long time. I haven't seen my cousin in years. What you been up to?
What up, cuz?
You didn't know, right? Yeah. So what have you been up to?
I've been promoting the book, doing my speaking engagements, trying to raise money for our foundation so we can kick off our leadership program next year. And of course, we are in preparation for the 100 years celebration concert being done by Global Citizens in Johannesburg on the 2nd of December.
That's some good stuff. Now, I've been to your book signings. The people that turn out for your book signings are amazing because they travel from all over. And
Nice.
the key word is Nelson Mandela's grandson. So let's take a different approach. Going to the mountain, you know, it's like a revelation. I looked at it differently from beyond the traditionals that you talk about in the book. It reminds me you're going to the peak and you're just taking a world view. And you did mention something like that in the book in a conversation with your grandfather. Do you remember that particular, do you know what I'm referencing?
The quotation that he says,
Yes.
he says, after climbing a great hill and you reach the top, you realize there are many more mountains that you have to climb.
Exactly. So it's really good. It seems like you had a lot of good wisdom throughout the years growing
Yes.
up, which a lot of people aren't privy to. And one thing I have to say about the book, it's written in very understandable language for all ages.
Yes.
And my daughter, who's 11, this is on her read. Anything I read, she'll be reading.
Nice.
So, and I want to encourage parents with children that they need to expose them to this. Now, one thing I believe too, life is about numbers. It's what you do between those numbers, living your dash, right? Now, you have a hard footstep. Those footprints you're stepping into is pretty serious. So how do you feel in how you managing that? Because yes, you have the blessings of your grandfather, well known, but you also want to set I am Ndaba. So
Yes.
how are you adapting and how do you get people to understand that you're more than just, you know, a bloodline from your grandfather?
Well, like you said, I have my own path. You know, so for me, it's the work that we do through our foundation, Africa Rising, which is all about youth empowerment. We work through education, entrepreneurship, technology, agriculture, focusing on the rural areas of South Africa. You know, for me, it's that our grandparents, they were able to break the physical chains of apartheid, of segregation, of slavery. And so I think it is our generation to continue that because we are now living in a post-colonial world where the bounds or the chains that lock us are no longer physical, they are mental now. You see, so, and the mental chains are a lot more difficult to break because you cannot see them. You know, unlike before you can say, oh, the judges are the ones who are against us or the police are against us. These days, it's us against us.
Excellent.
You know, it's me against myself.
Absolutely
I am my
right.
worst enemy. And so, you know, it's important for us to be able to communicate with our children to say, I'm an African, I know what it means to be an African, and I am proud of it. And, you know, because we live in such a hyper-capitalist and hyper-consumerist world, you know, people get lost in trying to, you know, portray this social media life that I'm living my best life, I'm living the good life. Actually, we have a real life, you know what I mean? It's not just a social media life, but it's a real life, which goes with ups and downs. It's not always about popping bottles and, you know, having fun, but it's also about working hard and, you know, going through long hours. So it's really about, you know, trying to find a balance and make young people understand that it's not just about having the latest gadget or having the freshest sneakers, but it's really about how do we make sure that the community that we are living in, that we are able to grow as a community and take care of each other in that community.
So, honestly speaking, tell me this. When you were younger, it seems like you had this struggle with holding on to certain traditions and cultures. Because you mentioned about learning to speak the language. So you want to touch on that? Because one of the things that gets lost is culture. So as a young boy, you recognize, I believe you asked your grandfather, why do I have to speak or learn it? And it was the best response. And I think people can read it, but I would like to hear it from you in your own words, because I know you carried that through.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about Afrikaans.
Yes.
Yes, so I didn't really think I needed to learn it because it's not my language, and it's the language of the former oppressor, right? But my grandfather, he used it as a tool to connect with his enemy, right? Because he says, speak to a person in a language that they understand, it goes to their head. Speak to a person in their own language and it goes to their heart. So it's really about how you are able to understand somebody, because language is a way to communicate. And a lot of the times it also shows you how people see the world. So my grandfather actually, he taught himself how to read and write and became fluent in Afrikaans. So by the time he actually got to prison, the prison wardens, obviously who were guarding him, they would receive letters from their loved ones because they were now on Robben Island. Many of them were young people. Some of them didn't finish school, and so Nelson Mandela actually had a much more comprehensive understanding of the language than the actual Afrikaners themselves.
Right.
And so he would, sometimes they weren't able to read those letters. Madiba would actually take those letters and translate it for the warden. And so because you did that, the warden would be very touched by that. And so they would perhaps do him a little favor. Maybe they would give him extra slices of bread, extra fruits, or maybe they'd give him extra blankets. And so when the authorities found this out, they were very obviously angry and they would change the guard. But no matter which new guard came, Nelson Mandela found a way to communicate with that person. He found a way to reach out to the human nature of that person. And through that, Nelson Mandela became friends with his warden. And so there was a rule on the prison that there's no warden that can guard Nelson Mandela for more than 3 months. Because whether you hate him, or you loathe him, or he's your enemy, Nelson Mandela would find a way to connect with you and become your friend. That is the power of Nelson Mandela. Whether you're 6 years old or 78 years old, Nelson Mandela would find a way to connect with you.
And that's critical, because I sit and I watch the news and I hear people complaining about different African Americans going to sit at the table with the president, whatever people's political views are. And I kind of took it from the stance that you were taught, because I'm like, well, to get what you want, sometimes you have to break bread with the enemies. And they did that all throughout history. And I think, like you said, with social media and personal feelings and emotions, people get caught up in the visual because of social media and everyone translating it, that they don't think deeper than that, So that was excellent. And I think what I like about your stories are, you don't sugarcoat it. You don't pretend that, yes, everything was beautiful. And for example, I come from a single parent household, and I connected really early with, you feeling a way about your parents separating.
Yeah.
So the thing is, for the community, is how did you kind of overcome that? Besides, do you feel if you didn't have your grandfather or the whole situation to explain it, how would someone be able to adapt to that kind of living?
I mean, to be honest, I think that's a hard question, and it affects people in different ways. I've seen some of my other sort of cousins when they parents split up. It takes quite a toll on kids, especially when they're young. and have not grown up in that kind of environment. But of course, if you grow up in a single parent environment, that's normal to you. It's not even a thing, right? Because to you, that's what it is. But I think it affects people who have had that, sort of unity in the home, and then there's a separation. And of course, I was very lucky to have a grandfather who was there for me to be able to take care of me and show me and teach me about life. So, it's one of those things when you growing up, I think also in a sort of in the hood, or you grow up in a hard way, is that you have to endure. In our culture, we say that a man endures. No matter what happens, you cannot cry or, act out. So you have to try and understand that this is part of life. And, it's not the end of the world, really, at the end of the day. What doesn't kill you can only make you stronger, right?
Exactly. And that's probably why I'm so strong. Oh my goodness. So we're going to take a short break.
Sure.
And let our viewers meditate on your words of wisdom. And we will return, honestly speaking, Amanda Jane sitting here with her long-lost cousin, Ndaba Mandela. Welcome back. I'm here, Amanda Jane, honestly speaking, with Mr. Ndaba Mandela, author of Going to the Mountain. Mr. Mandela.
Yes.
Ndaba. I believe words have power, and so do names. So, and you have a very long one. And I'm always asking people, do they know the definition of their names? And I'm sure you do. So share it with us.
Yes, so my full name is Ndaba Mandela. So my birth name is Ndaba Tembekile. So Ndaba means news in our language of Xhosa. So I am the maker of news, or the bringer of news. And then Tembekile means the trusted one. And then Zwela Jika is a name that I received after coming back from the mountain. So in our culture, going to the mountain is basically a rite of passage where young boys get circumcised between the ages of 18 to 21 when they are ready to become man. So in our culture, you have to earn manhood. You don't just turn 21 and become a man. You actually have to go through circumcision school.
Yeah, I heard about that. Okay, ouch. Well, and you've proven my point on names, because when you were named, they had high expectations, and your ancestors must be smiling as they watch over you that you've lived up to it.
I hope so.
I'm sure they are. Now, you have beautiful children, because,
Thank you.
I see pictures on Instagram, and how do they understand, but how, the back and forward, how do you maintain the relationships and keep in touch? Because they're going to miss daddy.
Yeah. Definitely takes a toll on my kids. My daughter's, she just turned 5, so she's not as, attached as my son. He's 7, turning 8 on the 12th. So, yeah, it takes a toll on the kids. And, really the best way is through video calls. I try to do at least once a week to do video calls with my kids. And I'm very happy that I'm actually going back home this Sunday. So I'm going to spend a full weekend with my kids next weekend.
I'm expecting to see a lot of pictures on Instagram.
You will.
Because I know you're not shy on pictures. So it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Africa Rising. Now, one thing I noticed is, which was really impressive, is that you're looking for social media ambassadors.
Yes.
So share with me about that, because I thought that was really interesting.
Well, I mean, obviously we want to, we feel that we're already at that place where we want to go out to the world and let people know what we're doing and get support from people who are interested in traveling to Africa or interested in being a mentor, for example, for young people. So we want our ambassadors to amplify our message and to get more awareness out there, and mainly to engage with Africa, because people are still, there's still a lot of Afro-pessimism that's happening out there in the world. So we want people to be able to just travel to Africa on a holiday, and understand that, probably what you're wearing or what's in your wardrobe was inspired by something from Africa, I don't think we realize how much Africa actually influences our lifestyle, our style, you know, the way we do things, our music, the way we dance, the way we communicate, you know.
And when I was in elementary school, we learned Swahili. And I was like, why do we need to learn that? And we learned African, I did African dancing.
Nice.
And the one song that stuck in my head from maybe kindergarten was Fungi, Alafia, Ashe, She. The whole song, there was a whole chant that, and it's funny because a lot of that is lost. And you mentioned the garments. Now, coming to America, Eddie Murphy didn't come up with that first. Coming to America and experiencing Labor Day, because I'm not an American born, even though I sound like one. Experiencing Labor Day, I do remember when we weren't in costumes. We wore dashikis. I have pictures of my father and my mother and even me. It was like the coolest thing. Tell us about dashikis, because I think a lot of people wear it, or the prints or the patterns. Is there some kind of connection or some kind of history behind that?
I'm not really sure, to be honest, but it's more of a West African thing.
Okay.
We don't really have it in South Africa. But yes, they've become very popular. Actually, I was wearing one the other day out to a friend's restaurant, and one of the security guards was like, please, can you bring me one? I'd love to have one of those. And so I actually did bring him one, and he's never been so happy, you know, in his life. So it's just to show you that, you know, Africa is sort of coming back to the forefront. I just think that we've just had a really negative perception in the media. And that's one of the goals that we're trying to do as Africa Rising, you know, is to show people that Africa is actually there's large parts of Africa which look like this, you know, which have high-rise buildings, which have highways. So obviously, but they're always showing the negative side on the media in Africa. So I'd love to host you one day when you come and visit me in Johannesburg.
Oh yes, I may actually be taking a trip to Kenya for some other reason. So
Kenya, okay, I got some people out there.
Yeah, and it's funny you should bring that up, because one thing I think the viewers are not aware of, in Africa, they support maybe 60 to 70% of apps on Androids and iPhones, probably beyond your knowledge, because it's part of something that I was working on and researching. And then we found that the response rate, we had a greater response in Africa than here, because they appreciate the technologies and the things that we're doing, you know, to simplify life and to communicate.
Yeah.
So there is a positive space, and the education level is remarkable. I mean, the school systems.
Yeah.
So you have some very advanced youth coming up. So now, when you go back, how are you received? Are they expecting you to change the world when you go back home, or are you just Daddy Ndaba, cousin Ndaba? What are you, you know?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a great expectation. Of course, you know, my grandfather was a president, so I think a lot of people expect me to follow in that kind of line. But you know, I feel that you know, one can affect change in many ways, not just necessarily through government, and that's why it's important, you know, the work that foundations do and, you know, non-profit organizations do. But of course, I think this model of non-profits is also going to cease to exist because it's unsustainable. You know, for us to continuously be relying on donors is not a sustainable way to go forward. So we also at Africa Rising are transforming our organization to a social enterprise.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yes.
Now I know you've been engaging with the United Nations here. Tell me about that.
So I have been an ambassador for United Nations AIDS, HIV/AIDS.
That's awesome.
For the past 8 years. I think I'm one of the longest serving ambassadors. And so I started with the World Cup in 2010, where we were basically getting the captains of teams as well as the presidents to sign a pledge to talk about HIV/AIDS in their communities and to make it a priority, right? And then we went to Brazil World Cup, where we went to the favelas, we went to orphanages, we went to stadiums, and we had a campaign. It was called Protect the Goal, you know, using football as an analogy to say that let us not allow HIV/AIDS to score a goal, right? know your HIV status, and use protection. Because those are the two key most things. A lot of people spread the disease because they don't know that they have the disease.
Yes.
So the first most important thing is to know that you don't have the disease, or you do have the disease, so you can get the medicine to protect yourself. You know, protect the goal, protect yourself, protect your partner, protect your dreams, because we all have dreams that we want to achieve as young people. So really it's about protecting your dreams, your future, and your loved ones. So protect the goal.
Yeah, we have to keep our generations as healthy as possible, because we are in a society where food is not processed the same, and there's just so much going on, so everything matters. That's interesting, because the natural expectation is that you're in speaking to the UN about political things. So it's really nice that you're taking that health stance, which is important, and it has died down. Not died down, but it's become quiet, and it can't be quiet. It must stay on top of on the forefront all the time, along with the other, diseases that's plaguing our country.
Yep.
That's really awesome. So where do you see yourself in the next 2-3 years, in 30 seconds or less?
In the next 2-3 years, I want to have a strong presence as far as our foundation here in America. I hope to have completed my master's degree, and I hope that I will have an exchange program where I'm getting many African Americans to communicate and do business across each other's continents.
Oh, that's very aggressive, progressive, and I like it. When we return, we'll talk to Ndaba Mandela about his master's degree here on Honestly Speaking with Amanda Jane. Ndaba, tell me about this master's degree you're working on.
So I am looking at applying to one of the Ivy League colleges here in America to do a master's in public admin.
Ivy League.
Yes, of course. I mean, I need to go to the best and be with the best, right?
You're already with the best right here on Honestly Speaking.
100%, 100%.
You're never going to forget this engagement. Now, are your children, you take things back for your children, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I always do different things, different people, because, my cousins or my family, we're all unique. Mm-hmm. Do your children play with slime? I went to Slime Bash. It was the most interesting thing. Do your children know anything about slime or play with slime?
Yeah, I think kids love slime, to be honest with you.
Well, you don't let them make it at home. It's kind
Not at home, no.
Okay, it's not messier. So my daughter has sent for your children 2 of her slimes that she purchased at Slime Bash.
Oh, wow.
So
Thank
she
you.
picked one for the boy, one for the girl.
Nice.
And just know that it won't leave stains, and they are scented. They have interesting smells. And I hate to admit, I ended up buying slime. So, because it's actually therapeutic when you start playing with it, but I'm also a big kid. So when you go home,
Thank you
you
so
tell
much.
them, my daughter, her name is Quinn, has personally sent her slime.
Thank you to Quinn.
Tell them don't eat it.
Yes.
I won't be held responsible once. So, is there anything, first of all, we know people have your book, but there's still so many that's deprived. Where can they get your book?
They can get it on Amazon. It's available. Audiobook is also available on Amazon. And all good bookstores around the nation.
Yes. So is there anything, I think we touched on some really interesting topics that are not standard, which I really like, because, you want to hear more, we know more of you.
Yes.
So what is it, tell me something about you that you haven't shared that you want to share.
About me?
Yes. Like, what do you like to do? Do you like to dance? Do you sing?
I do like to dance. I like to socialize, I like to hang out. I love to dance to reggae, dancehall, mostly. That's my favorite music to dance to. Of course, I'm a hip hop head.
Excellent.
I'm involved with the Hip Hop Museum out here and Generation Hip Hop. So yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. And we're going to talk again, because when you come back to visit, you're coming back Black History Month.
That's right, I'll be here.
Exactly, and we're going to have another talk, and we enjoyed our conversation in the lab. And I would like to say that in closing, I'm going to leave you my soul inspiration. We are the stories we tell of ourselves, but we can't tell stories if we don't know our history. And there's a lot of value in holding on to culture and customs. So children, as you get older, do not be offended or fight your family against customs and traditions, and hold on to the wonderful comments and supporting statements that they tell you. If you have to, write them down. Because looking at Ndaba, I'm sure when his grandfather was whispering these words of wisdom in his ear, the same way your name was whispered when you were born, you never imagined at that point in time the value and where it would take you sitting here today. So hold on to your history, because that's what keeps us immortal. Thank you very much for being here with us.
It's a pleasure.
On Honestly Speaking with your cousin Amanda James.